When Trump flips, the base's permission structure flips with him. Let's talk about how a political movement changes their own standards when their leader changes his position. Because for years, Trump and his allies told their audience, we're the anti-corruption people. We're the affordability people. We're the law and order people. We're the free speech people, the Second Amendment people, the states' rights people. And then, one by one, we see those claims collide with reality.
Promise number 2. Trump said he would lower grocery prices.
A vote for Trump means your groceries will be cheaper.
Actually, grocery prices have gone up almost every month that Trump's been back in office. And Trump's tariffs are a big reason why, simply because America imports a huge chunk of its food supply. It's not just tariffs on imported food that drove up grocery prices. Trump's cruel mass deportations are causing a shortage of farm workers and meat packers, which has also contributed to soaring food prices. But Trump's promises to lower costs didn't end there. Promise number 3, Trump said he would lower your energy bill.
And I'm going to cut your energy prices in half, 50%.
Go ahead.
The question becomes, do you hold the leader to the standard, or do you bend the standard around the leader? Trump repeatedly declared victory over inflation in speeches, even as costs remained a top voter concern. The Trump family's crypto ventures have turned into a major revenue engine for his presidency. And as the Justice Department's handling of the Epstein files becomes a national flashpoint again, watch how quickly release everything can become trust the process, depending on whose interests feel exposed. This episode isn't about calling voters names, okay? Like crazy or cult member or willfully ignorant. It's not about that. It's about documenting the mechanism. When Trump flips, the base's permission structure flips with him. And that's where the Quiet Loud begins. I'm DeAntony Collins. And if you're new here, we are outraged, tired, but we try to focus on pattern recognition, facts, names, dates, receipts, so you can leave informed, not inflamed. So go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and tap that bell. All right, let's get into it. So here's the position. Trump casts himself as a guy who understands the cost of living, who gets what groceries and rent feels like. I mean, he said it himself, groceries. Groceries. Nobody talked about groceries as if we don't talk about groceries from week to week in households all over this country. Now here's the flip. Today, we hear in Trump's speeches him repeatedly declaring victory over inflation over and over again, while the cost of living remains a dominant voter concern. And even as Republican strategists warn that he's undercutting his own message, doing exactly what they said the Democrats were doing, touting the economy and not recognizing that people are hurting. And the adjustment of the base, or the people who validate him, is subtle, but it's powerful. When the leader says it's fixed, then the debate stops being, are prices still high? And becomes, okay, who are we blaming for this frustration? And most times we know who it is. It's Biden or it's Jerome Powell. I mean, it's anybody but Trump and the people he put in place to handle all these matters. And that's why the word affordability matters. I mean, we've seen Trump repeatedly mock this term lately, even worrying some Republicans because it signals a kind of emotional distance from the very pain that he says he's solving or solved. That's exactly what he campaigned against. And you can see the pattern. If the economic campaign promise doesn't match with our lived reality, the movement doesn't just revive the promise, it revises the whole explanation. Now, that's not always the case for every supporter. I mean, politics is messy. But for the loudest MAGA supporters, the standard becomes elastic. The economy is great because we say it's great. And any contrary measurement becomes, it's just the mainstream media. It's a hoax, or it's the deep state, or it's bad faith. And once that standard becomes elastic in economics, It's easy to stretch it into something even more personal, like corruption. Because during the campaign, Trump cast himself the anti-corruption guy. He said he wasn't like them. Drain the swamp. That's what they said. Now here's the flip. Document it. Now we'll come with receipts. Investigations into the Trump family's crypto business reported that these ventures became a major source of family cash income, including from token sales and a Trump-branded meme coin, not to mention the frivolous lawsuits against the federal government that he runs, raising serious conflict of interest concerns among ethics experts because the family is profiting while Trump holds office. Now, this is no different from when they sold access to Trump through increasing Mar-a-Lago memberships, where he spends most weekends. Or foreign nationals staying at his now foreclosed former Trump hotel in D.C., all during his first term. Reuters reporting includes the structure and the scale, and it doesn't need a conspiracy to be troubling. If foreign and domestic investors can pour money into ventures tied to the president's family, like MBS out of Saudi Arabia, then the perception of access is the product, even if there's no proven quid pro quo. And the basis adjustment shows up as the new moral logic. What used to be described as corruption now becomes just business, or smart thinking, or winning, or they would just pony up to they would do it too. House Oversight Democrats put it bluntly in a report framing this record of allegations and documented transactions as nothing less than, quote, professionalized corruption. Now here's the quiet loud point. You don't have to agree with Democrats to understand this tension. The Drain the Swamp movement now has to explain why enrichment is acceptable when it's their guy. Because, see, they couldn't even prove any of the phony allegations that they were alleging about a so-called Biden crime family. I mean, if you remember, go back far enough, Ukraine lost their protection from us during the Trump administration because Zelensky would not back the idea that they had Biden under some kind of investigation, which is what they were spending over here, is what they were selling the whole time. And they never came with anything. And now we see it right in front of our face. And the standard changes. And rather than demanding a clean separation between public power and private profit, many MAGA voters simply update the standard to, I'm fine with it. And when your corruption standard becomes elastic, your standards on transparency become elastic too, especially on something as radioactive as the Epstein files. And the position you've heard for years was, we have to expose the monsters. We need to release the files. We want full transparency, right? Now here's the flip. As the Epstein files become a political and legal flashpoint yet again, the debate pivots from, quote, release everything to the process is complete or redactions that we did are necessary, depending on who feels threatened that day. Attorney General Pam Bondi faced sharp questioning in the House Judiciary hearing over the Justice Department's handling of the Epstein-related documents. Lawmakers across party lines expressed frustration at extensive redactions and withheld materials, while Bondi defended a review involving hundreds of lawyers and millions of pages. Now, that's just not a small detail. When the government says we reviewed more than 3 million pages, the public expects transparency to be clean and consistent and centered around the victims. But C-SPAN clearly captures how disputed that trust is right now, as a lot of the survivors were on hand and the Attorney General would not even turn to acknowledge, as they just wholly indicted her as someone who ignored their cries for help and transparency and to be heard and to offer their witness testimony if need be. They were ignored. They were turned down. Now here's the basis adjustment. When transparency could harm the Democrats, transparency was a moral imperative. We stop at nothing to get the truth, and Democrats usually join in. But when transparency could produce any kind of uncomfortable names or questions inside their own coalition, suddenly the most important thing is that we don't be reckless. We need to protect the victims, whoever they are, because clearly it's not the survivors. They say things like, we need to move on, or we're all done here. And that's not an accusation about every Republican voter, because we can see that there is major frustration. A lot of people are downright ticked off because they believed in this. A lot of these people are serious about wanting to protect children, but they have allowed themselves to have to pick sides in whatever these cultural war wedge issues are. So these folks who they believe all kinds of conspiracies going all the way back to Pizzagate. So you never know whether it's willful ignorance or any of the other things we were talking about, but it is a description of a pattern you can observe in the messaging. The standard isn't transparency anymore. It's advantage and who has it. And once you've trained an audience to accept process over principle, the next flip becomes even easier. Calling the DOJ weaponized until you want it weaponized. So here's the position. For years, Trump and his allies said the DOJ was weaponized against them. Said that they were politically persecuted, partisan law enforcement, or a term they love to use, lawfare. Now here's the flip. The DOJ is carrying out what can only be described as a revenge tour with concerns about prosecutorial independence and targeting perceived enemies. And now if you want a crisp receipt of why First Amendment alarms are ringing all over the place, the Washington Post reports a D.C. grand jury declined to indict 6 Democratic lawmakers after a DOJ investigation sparked a video where they urged service members to refuse illegal orders, an investigation that triggered backlash over perceived political motivation and free speech concerns. This matters, and it matters because grand juries almost always indict. I mean, you've heard the phrase, you can indict a ham sandwich, so when they don't, it often signals skepticism about the case or the way they brought the case. So the adjustment you might see among MAGA is that weaponization is evil. And then that will become weaponization is accountability, as long as it's pointing outward at the people you perceive to be your enemy. And once the public internalizes that the process itself can be the punishment, civic speech gets chilled. And that's the point. Even before anyone is convicted of anything, all they want is the investigation out there, something hanging over the person's head that they can keep bringing up. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. Now watch how the same elasticity shows up in fiscal policy, where debt is deadly now until tax cuts are on the table. So here's the position. Republicans campaign as deficit hawks on responsibility, restraint, and debt as threat to our future. But here's the flip. The Congressional Budget Office forecasts the U.S. budget deficit will rise to about $1.853 trillion in fiscal 2026, with deficits near 6% of GDP projected to persist, driven in part by Trump policies, including the extended tax cuts and tariffs, with net interest costs climbing sharply over time. So the big ugly bill extended the 2017 tax cuts and is projected by CBO to add trillions to the deficit over a decade, while tariff revenues offset some, but not all of the fiscal impact. Now here's the MAGA adjustment. Debt stops being a moral issue and becomes a technical argument. They say that the growth will pay for itself, that tariffs will cover it, that it's fine, that don't look over there until it'll start to rise at some point. But reporting on the same CBO forecast highlights CBO leadership warning that the trajectory is just not sustainable. Again, this isn't about insulting the voters, but it is starting to get pretty weird about why they're not seeing what we see. It's about documenting how a movement can treat deficits as existential until the policy benefits them or their donor class, their coalition, or just Trump's campaign promises that they claim they voted for. And once the standards are elastic at home, they often become transactional abroad, where allies and enemies can change depending on the day's narrative. America first gets sold as strength, loyalty to our allies, toughness on our adversaries, clarity in our foreign policy. No new wars, right? That was what they said. Now here's the flip. Reuters reported dismay and confusion in Kyiv after Trump made comments that Ukrainians viewed as aligning with Russian narratives, prompting officials and citizens to warn that U.S. posture was shifting in a way that felt like we were taking the enemy's side. In that reporting, Ukrainians emphasized the stakes, that their territory is being occupied, that the war is still ongoing, and that the danger of political destabilization under wartime conditions is increasing. And the mental gymnastics looks like this. Yesterday's ally can become today's problem, and yesterday's adversary can become today's partner. And the audience is asked to treat each reversal as some strategic genius, some 4D chess move. This isn't a claim that diplomacy never involves compromise. We know it does. It's the speed and the messaging. When the standard is trust in Trump, whatever Trump says today, or in Mike Johnson's case, I haven't seen it. Foreign policy becomes theater, and allies learn that they're expendable in the narrative economy. So, what do we do with an episode like this? We end with fast receipts and we stay grounded. We protect the democratic immune system, and we do that with transparency and oversight and free speech. If this episode helped you understand the pattern, standards that stretch, and the mental gymnastics they cause, then do 3 things. Like this video so that it travels further. Subscribe and hit the bell. And take 1 civic action tonight. Support oversight and transparency. Call your representatives about ethics rules, DOJ independence, and election administration protection. Democracy can survive disagreement, but it cannot survive a world where our standards change depending on who's speaking. All right? I'm going to ask you to be loud in your listening. Stay informed, stay grounded, and stay loud, quietly. I'm DeAntony Collins, and this has been The Quiet Loud. Y'all take care.